It started with an orange umbrella. Bright, ridiculous, and impossible to miss, especially on a cloudless afternoon. I hadn't seen that umbrella in years. It used to live in the trunk of my car, and I always joked that it was cursed because every time I carried it, something went wrong. Lost a job interview once with that thing in hand. Got food poisoning on a trip where it was in my backpack. My wife said I was being dramatic and superstitious in a very uncool way, but I stopped carrying it after our 3rd anniversary. So imagine my confusion when I spotted it bobbing up and down through the crowd on 3rd Street, crossing toward the cafe I used to take her to. It was hers, and under it, walking too close to a man I didn't recognize, was her. Same walk, same coat, same habit of pushing her hair behind her left ear even when it wasn't in the way. But not the same look. Her face was lighter, brighter, almost giddy, like someone on vacation, like someone free. They went inside, sat by the window. She took off her coat and laughed at something he said before the menus even landed on the table. I watched through the windshield of my parked car, parked 2 storefronts down with the engine still running. I wasn't planning to stop. I hadn't been downtown in months, not since she told me she needed space and started sleeping at her sister's place on the weekends. Only I guess it wasn't her sister's anymore. Not unless her sister had grown a beard and wore a vintage leather jacket. I pulled the car key halfway out of the ignition, paused, then reached for my wallet. Pulled out the only thing that hadn't changed in my world in 12 years. A little Polaroid of us from our first winter. We were standing in front of a snow-covered mailbox, both soaked and grinning. I used to think it was the happiest photo I'd ever own. Today it looked like a joke. I flipped it over. The back was blank. So I wrote something. 6 words. Don't come home. You chose him. I folded it once, walked calmly into the cafe, and slid the note between her water glass and the edge of her phone. She didn't see me at first. He did. He tilted his head, confused but not alarmed. She turned around slowly, almost annoyed. When our eyes met, I expected panic, guilt, fear, something human. Instead, she blinked, smirked faintly, and rolled her eyes. That broke something in me. I didn't say a word, just walked out and kept walking. I didn't go back to the car. I didn't answer my phone when it buzzed 3 minutes later. I didn't care. But what she did after reading the note, that was something no one prepared me for. She didn't text. She didn't call. She didn't come home that night. She did something else. Something revolting. And I have the proof. I didn't go home that night. I didn't even know where I was going. I just walked. Through side streets I hadn't seen since my 20s. Past shuttered shops and bars that no longer recognized me. My phone kept buzzing in my pocket, but I let it ring out. I couldn't bear to see her name on the screen. I couldn't handle whatever excuse she was crafting in her head. So I wandered until my legs gave out, sat on a park bench near the old duck pond, and stared at the still water until the sun dipped beneath the trees. I told myself maybe she'd cry. Maybe she'd leave the cafe in tears. Maybe she'd rush home, devastated, desperate to explain, to fix things, to say she'd made a mistake. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to hear it, but somewhere deep inside me, I was still stupid enough to hope she'd be sorry. That's how far gone I was. Around midnight, I finally pulled my phone out. No missed calls anymore. Just one text. From her. It said, "You've always been dramatic." That was it. No apology. No denial. Just 6 words designed to slice clean through my spine. I stared at the screen until it blurred, and then I did something I never thought I would. I opened her Instagram. I hadn't looked in months. I told myself it was her space, her outlet, and besides, we barely posted about each other anymore. But tonight, I needed to see. Her account had a new story posted just 2 hours earlier. It was a boomerang. Her hand, clinking glasses with someone else's. A caption, "Cocktail glass freedom tastes better in the sun." I nearly dropped my phone. That orange umbrella was in the background. She'd posted it from the same cafe after I left. After I handed her that note. While I was spiraling alone on a freezing bench, she was celebrating. She didn't even have the decency to pretend she cared. And that's when I realized something horrifying. She didn't. She wasn't shocked when she saw me because she wasn't hiding. She rolled her eyes because she saw me as a nuisance, not a husband. That orange umbrella wasn't an accident. It was a signal I had simply ignored. She wanted to be seen. She didn't just betray me. She paraded it, as if I were the villain for reacting to the reality she created. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, trying to hold the version of her I'd known up against the one I saw now, and they didn't match. I couldn't reconcile the woman who once cried when I brought her soup in bed with the one who laughed into someone else's mouth just feet from where we used to share Sunday mornings. And then, the next morning, it got worse. Much worse. Because when I finally got home, after hours of walking in circles, I found the front door wide open. And inside? She wasn't gone. No. She was hosting. And who she was hosting will haunt me for the rest of my life. Because this isn't just a betrayal story. This is a demolition. And I'm the last thing standing in the rubble. The door was ajar. Not unlocked, open. It swayed gently in the morning breeze like some casual invitation to chaos, as if the universe itself were nudging me to walk in and see just how far this betrayal could go. I stood there for a moment on the porch, hoping, praying that maybe it had blown open. Maybe she'd come home late and just forgotten to close it. Maybe she was asleep upstairs and everything else had been a hallucination. But I already knew. Deep down, I knew. I pushed the door slowly and it creaked like something in a bad dream. The first thing I noticed was the smell, vanilla candles. Not the ones we used to light during movie nights, but the heavy, sickly sweet ones she always said gave her headaches. I hadn't seen them in years. She must have bought them for him. The second thing I noticed was laughter. Male laughter. Not coming from the living room, not the backyard, the kitchen. I stepped in slowly, heart hammering so loud I was sure they'd hear me. I hadn't mentally prepared for this. I thought maybe I'd catch her alone, hungover on guilt, maybe throwing her things in a bag. But not this. Not her in one of my shirts draped over her like it belonged more to her new life than it ever did to me. And not him, barefoot, leaning on the counter, drinking coffee from my world's okayest coder mug. The one she gave me as a joke 5 Christmases ago. They both looked up at the same time. She didn't jump. Didn't look shocked. She just blinked and said, with that same smirk as in the cafe, "Wow. You're up early." He looked between us, not even ashamed. Just vaguely amused, like he'd wandered into the third act of a sitcom and didn't know the plot yet. He was younger, of course. Muscular in the effortless way guys are when they've never had to work 60-hour weeks to keep the lights on. His arms were tattooed, his hair tousled like he'd spent the night being adored. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I felt like I was looking at my life through glass, separated, muted, unreal. I focused on small details to stay grounded. A spoon on the floor. Her chipped nail polish. My favorite mug still warm in his hands. "You didn't answer my text," she added casually, as if I'd just missed a dinner reservation. And the note? That was a bit dramatic. That word again. Dramatic. Like discovering your wife's affair in real time was some kind of overreaction. Like I was the one breaking trust by showing up unannounced to the house I paid for. I finally found my voice. It cracked, but it came out. "Who is he?" She raised an eyebrow. "Does it matter?" He shrugged and sipped my coffee. I couldn't think. I couldn't feel. There was no room. My body was packed full of disbelief, like someone had pumped me with cement and told me to walk it off. "You're bringing him here?" I managed. "Into our home?" She laughed. Laughed. "Melvin, don't be so territorial. It's not like we've been doing great." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I walked upstairs in a fog and locked the door behind me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the mirror for 20 minutes and tried to see the man she used to love. He wasn't there. And that night, something inside me cracked, not just from the betrayal, but from the realization that she never planned to apologize. She wasn't hiding him. She wasn't sorry. She was comfortable. She had moved on mentally, emotionally, maybe even legally, and she hadn't told me because she didn't think she owed me that courtesy. She saw me as a placeholder. A steady thing she could leave on the shelf until something better came along. And when it did, she didn't even flinch. She just reached out and grabbed it like I was nothing more than an expired product collecting dust. I slept in my car that night. Not because I had nowhere to go, but because I couldn't bear to breathe the same air as them. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was what I found the next day. And who had known all along. I barely slept in the car. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind dragged me back into the kitchen, my kitchen, where she stood barefoot in my shirt, pouring coffee for a stranger like it was a normal Sunday. My back ached. My mouth was dry. I sat in that driver's seat like a ghost trapped in his own life, staring through the windshield at the house I used to feel safe in. The porch light flickered, then went out completely, like even the house had decided it was done pretending. By morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed air. I needed food. I needed something. So I started driving aimlessly through the neighborhood, engine humming softly as the sun pushed through the trees. I ended up at the one place I thought might still feel normal, my brother's hardware store. Marcus and I aren't close in that warm movie brothers way. We're different people. He's loud, athletic, confident. I'm not. But we've always had this unspoken truce. I stay out of his business, and he tries not to make me feel like I'm made of glass. I figured if I told anyone, it had to be him. If I didn't say it out loud soon, I thought I might disappear altogether. He was in the back, unloading boxes when I walked in. "Dude, you look like death. I need to talk." We went out behind the shop where no customers could hear. I told him everything. The café, the note, the open door, the stranger in my kitchen, her laugh, the mug. I expected him to be shocked, to swear, to threaten to punch someone, to say, "That be asterisk 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 asterisk," like any decent brother would. But Marcus just leaned against the dumpster, arms crossed, lips pressed tight. "Mel," he started, rubbing his jaw, and my stomach dropped. "Don't do that," I said. "Don't mel me." He sighed. "Listen, man, I wasn't sure how to bring this up before, but I've seen her with that guy, Palmer's, couple of times. I didn't know what it was exactly, but it didn't look like work meetings, all right? Couldn't breathe." "How long?" He looked away. "A month? Maybe 2. I took a step back, heart pounding in my ears. "And you didn't think to tell me?" "I didn't have proof. And I thought maybe you knew." That hit harder than anything she had done. Maybe I knew. So to him, and maybe everyone else, I was the idiot husband playing dumb, too fragile to hear the truth. Too pathetic to confront what was happening right under his nose. I realized in that moment that I hadn't just lost her. I had lost my dignity in the eyes of the people I trusted most. I left without saying goodbye. I sat in a grocery store parking lot for over an hour, trying to make sense of everything. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it. Then it buzzed a second time. This time it wasn't her. It was my mother. "Tessa said you've been acting erratic. Are you okay?" My mother, the woman who always took her side, who thought Tessa was too good for you, but so patient with your moods. Tessa had gotten to her too. I stared at the message and wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I opened her contact and typed something I never thought I'd write. "You should talk to your daughter-in-law. She might have forgotten to tell you she moved another man into my house." Then I blocked her. I drove to a motel off the interstate, paid for a room with stained carpet and buzzing lights, and sat there in silence. That's when I opened my laptop. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to feel like I was taking back control. Maybe I wanted to hurt myself more. But I opened Tessa's old shared drive folder, the one we used for tax receipts and house projects, and I found something I shouldn't have seen. PDF. Titled, Vacation_proposal PDF. My stomach turned. I opened it. It was a couple's itinerary. Flights. Spa reservations. A room with a king bed and an ocean view. Dated 3 weeks from now. Her name was on the booking. So was his. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She was planning a future with him. A tropical escape. Paid for, get this, with our joint credit card. My name. My money. And she hadn't even filed for divorce yet. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a lapse. This was orchestrated. And I was the only one who hadn't seen the rehearsal. But if she thought I was going to vanish quietly, let her skip town with the man in my shirt, she was wrong. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew where she would be that night. And I knew I wouldn't stay silent anymore. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes, it arrives at 6:30 p.m., dressed in casual lies, carrying a bottle of wine you paid for, and smiling like nothing's wrong. That's what I kept thinking as I sat alone in the parking lot outside her sister's house. Well, supposed sister's house. That's where she told me she was staying for space. That word had become her favorite lately. Space. As if I were some suffocating weight pulling her down, instead of the man who held her up through every damn crisis she ever had. I watched from across the street, slouched low in the driver's seat, engine off, heart racing. The windows of the house were lit. I saw figures moving through the curtains, heard faint bursts of laughter. I recognized one of the voices immediately. Hers. Effortless. Relaxed. Not a trace of guilt or discomfort. She was at ease. With him. I had one chance and I was going to take it. Earlier that afternoon, I had printed copies of the Rio vacation proposal, hotel reservations, flight confirmations, and her smiling digital signature at the bottom. I also printed the transaction records from our joint account showing exactly where the payments had come from. It was all there. Black and white. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I had control of the narrative. I didn't knock. I walked straight through the gate, up the porch, and opened the door. They were all at the dinner table. Her sister. Her sister's husband. Their kids. And Tessa seated at the far end, glass of red wine in hand, wearing a sweater I gave her for our 10th anniversary. Right beside her sat him, leather jacket, smug grin, looking like a background character in the wrong movie. The room fell silent. Tessa's fork froze midair. She stared at me like I was some ghost she hadn't expected to rise. "Melvin," her sister said. "What are you doing here?" I didn't respond. I stepped forward, set the stack of printed documents right in the center of the table, and looked Tessa dead in the eye. "Thought your family should see where their saint is planning to spend May." She looked at the papers without touching them. But her sister reached over, flipped the first page, and began to read. Her eyes widened. Her husband leaned in. Everyone got quiet again, this time colder. Tessa slowly pushed her chair back and stood up. "Can we talk outside?" "No," I said. "You can talk here. In front of them. Since you've been lying to all of us." Her voice dropped, tight with anger. "You're making a scene." I laughed for the first time in days. It didn't feel good. It felt hollow, cracked, like glass breaking in my throat. "A scene? You're planning a romantic getaway with your affair partner using my credit card while still married to me, and I'm making a scene." She glanced toward her sister, who now looked horrified. "You told me he was just a client," her sister whispered. "Oh, he's more than that," I said, turning to her. "He drinks my coffee, sleeps in my bed, and wears my bathrobe. Would you like to guess what else he's borrowed?" "Okay, stop," Tessa snapped. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said, my voice finally steady. "I've been embarrassed, Tessa. Every time I covered for your late nights. Every time I ignored my gut. Every time I believed the garbage you fed me. This is clarity." The guy finally stood up, trying to play tough. "Maybe it's time you left, man." I stepped closer. "And maybe it's time you stopped living in a house you didn't help pay for." That shut him up. Her sister finally spoke again. "Tessa, is this true?" Tessa didn't answer. She just stared at me like I was dirt beneath her heel. I turned to her family. "I didn't come here to fight. I came here to make sure the truth wasn't just something she got to control. She's been living a second life. She's been manipulating all of you. And while you sat around this table thinking she was just having a hard time, she was mocking every one of us." Without another word, I turned and walked out. The door slammed behind me. I got to the car and sat there, shaking. Not with regret, but with release. I had said it. I had done something. I wasn't the fool in the shadows anymore. For the first time since this started, I had burned the mask she'd been wearing. I don't know what happened after I left. Maybe her sister yelled. Maybe she cried. Maybe she spun more lies. But it didn't matter. I had broken the silence. But I wasn't done. Because what I found later that night, an email buried in the drafts folder of our old shared laptop, would take everything even darker. She hadn't just been lying to me. She'd been preparing for something much, much worse. And I was about to find out what. I didn't go back to the motel that night. I drove around until the sun disappeared and the streetlights flickered on like nervous eyes blinking open across the city. I didn't know where I was heading until I realized I'd pulled into the driveway of my old place again, our place. The house she had defiled. The one I had poured years into. It was still technically mine. My name was on every bill, every deed. I had every right to step inside, even if the air inside had been poisoned with betrayal. The porch light was still out. Her car was gone. The leather-jacketed parasite was probably with her, sharing drinks, maybe laughing about what had happened over dinner like it was just a rough scene in a comedy sketch. I stepped inside, careful not to touch the walls like they might burn me. The kitchen was a mess, crumbs everywhere, empty wine bottle in the sink, and the scent of her perfume still clinging to the air like a bruise. I went straight upstairs, not because I was searching for something specific, but because part of me still needed answers. Still wanted to understand how someone I once knew down to her heartbeat could do this. The laptop was still there, sitting on the nightstand, plugged in. It was hers. A newer model, but we'd once shared it before she demanded a separate account for privacy. She never logged out though. Maybe she assumed I'd never look. Or maybe she just didn't care anymore. I hesitated. Opening someone's personal files, even under these circumstances, felt invasive. But what she had done was beyond privacy. She had already shredded the sacred personal things between us. So I opened it. The desktop was a scattered mess of photos, work docs, and files labeled with random numbers. I didn't see anything suspicious at first. Then, out of curiosity, or maybe just desperation, I opened her email app. That's where I saw it. A draft. Not sent. Not recent. But not old either. Subject line, terms for the transition. That alone made my heart start to pound. I clicked it open. It was a letter. Typed formal. Cold. Addressed to a lawyer. But not one I knew. And it wasn't just about filing for divorce. It was about leverage. In the draft, she laid out a timeline. Not of the affair, but of her exit strategy. She detailed how she'd gradually shift her presence out of our shared finances. How she'd document exaggerated emotional instability on my part. There were mentions of counseling logs which we never attended, witness statements from friends I hadn't seen in months, and even a suggestion that she might file preemptively to establish a narrative. There was a paragraph that made my blood go cold. If approached strategically, I can secure spousal support during the transition and full control of the property while Melvin works through his volatility. Volatility. I haven't yelled in years. I haven't so much as slammed a door. I've been a doormat. An apology machine. A passive fixer of everything she ever wanted to break. And now I was being painted as some unstable wreck, all so she could steal my money, my house, and probably rewrite history to our entire friend group. And then I saw the attachments she had intended to send with the email. One of them was a cropped screenshot of one of my journal entries. It was from a year ago, something I wrote in a moment of dark depression after my father passed. It read, "Some days I don't feel real. Like I could just disappear and no one would notice." She had screenshot it and planned to use it as proof of mental instability. She kept tabs on everything. Quietly. Calculated. And twisted every vulnerable part of me into a weapon. I stared at that screen for what felt like forever. And then something inside me, something small but sharp, snapped. She wasn't just cruel. She was intentional. Every decision, every smile, every soft apology followed by "you're just overreacting" was a breadcrumb in a carefully laid trap. I had been living with a stranger wearing the mask of a woman I used to love. I didn't delete the draft. I didn't even close the file. I left it open, right there on the screen, like a mirror turned toward the monster she was becoming. But I copied everything. I transferred the files onto a drive and emailed them to myself with the subject line, "I'll never forget." The version of her no one believes exists. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed we once shared and waited until morning. Because the next day, I was going to meet with someone. Not a lawyer. Not a therapist. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Someone who knew her before she was this polished lie. Someone who, I was starting to suspect, had tried to warn me before and whom I had pushed away. If I was going to fight this war, I needed truth on my side. And he had plenty of it. There was one person who had every reason to hate Tessa, and I had ignored him for years. Brushed him off. Called him bitter. Paranoid. Maybe even jealous. He had tried to warn me once, more than once, actually, and I shut him down like a fool with a blindfold, too proud to believe the woman I loved was capable of anything less than grace. His name was Ellis. Ellis was my oldest friend. We went to high school together, roommates in college, best man at my wedding. Tessa had never liked him. She said he was cynical, negative, too suspicious of everyone. At the time, I believed her. I thought maybe she was right. After all, Ellis had gone through a messy divorce. He drank a little too much. He didn't sugarcoat anything. But maybe that was why he saw her for who she really was long before I did. The last time Ellis and I had a real conversation was 3 years ago. He pulled me aside after Tessa had stormed out of a dinner we hosted. Said she'd gotten a work call but left her phone on the table. Ellis told me straight up, "Something's off about her, Mel. I've seen this before. That girl's not in love with you. She's playing long-term chess while you're still trying to master checkers." I told him to get the hell out of my house. I never invited him back. But now, with everything I'd learned, everything I had lived, I realized Ellis wasn't just right. He had been speaking to me from experience. He knew how this game worked, and I was finally ready to stop pretending I wasn't a pawn. I texted him early that morning. Just one line. "You were right. Can we talk?" He responded in under a minute. By noon, I was sitting across from him in a nearly empty bar downtown. He looked older, grayer, but he gave me the same skeptical smirk he always had. "I never wanted to be right," he said before I even sat down. I told him everything, and I mean everything. The café, the note, the man in my kitchen, the draft email, the manipulated journal entries, the vacation she was planning with him. I expected disbelief or at least shock. But Ellis just nodded, slowly, like a detective listening to a witness confirm a theory. "She's been working this plan for a long time," he finally said. "And not just with this guy. I saw her pull the same psychological crap with you back when you got that job offer in Denver and she talked you out of it." My head snapped up. "You think that was part of it?" "I know it was," he said. "She wanted you small, manageable, predictable. You getting a better job across state lines meant you might grow without her. That's the worst thing that can happen to someone like her, losing control of the narrative." I felt sick. I remembered that fight. I remembered how she cried, said she couldn't handle being away from her family, that I was being selfish. So I declined the offer. Took a local job with less pay and no benefits for the first year. I thought I was choosing love. No, I was choosing to stay in her palm. Ellis leaned forward. "You want my advice?" "I think I need it more than I want it. Expose her, but not with noise, with order, with calm, collected, painful clarity. The kind of truth that doesn't just hit, it sticks. You've got the receipts. You've got the email. Now you need the timing. Don't let her run ahead of you with her fake sob story." I nodded slowly. I already humiliated her once in front of her family. Ellis smirked. "Good. Let's aim bigger." That's when he laid out the plan. He told me about this small community event Tessa had helped organize every year, an annual fundraiser for her company's clients, mostly older folks and business partners she always wanted to impress. I had helped her print flyers for it just last month. She was set to give a speech. There'd be press, cameras, donors, her world all in one room. I felt my chest tighten. "You're not suggesting I crash it?" "No," Ellis said, eyes hard. "I'm suggesting you take back your voice. The one she's been slowly choking for years. Not through rage, through revelation." He was right. She had taken too much already. My peace, my money, my trust. Even my name was being twisted in her mouth like a bitter taste she wanted to spit out. But I still had one thing, the truth, and it was time to make sure she never buried it again. I spent that night preparing. I organized everything, documents, timelines, screenshots, statements. I built a quiet case not for court but for reality. For anyone who still believed she was the polished, perfect wife. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to rage. I was going to reveal what happened at that fundraiser. Let's just say, Tessa never expected me to speak. But she'll never forget what I said. And neither will anyone else who was in that room. The event was hosted in a rented community hall. One of those bright, echoey places with folding chairs, too many balloons, and a banner that read, "Together We Grow," in bold navy letters across the front wall. I'd been to this fundraiser 3 times in the past. Tessa always made a scene of dragging me into pictures with her. Placing her hand delicately on my chest like I was some loyal golden retriever she'd trained to stay quiet and look supportive. This time I wasn't there for show. I was there for truth. She stood near the back, shaking hands and laughing with some elderly board members, dressed in a crisp cream suit, hair tied back the way she always wore it when she wanted to appear polished and in control. The guy him wasn't there. She must have told him to keep his distance. Appearances mattered today. I waited for the cue. I knew her schedule. She always insisted on going on stage halfway through the program to deliver her little speech, thank donors, talk about vision. So when the lights dimmed and the announcer introduced her, I took my seat in the second row. dead center. She didn't notice me at first. Not until she reached the podium. Not until her eyes swept the crowd and locked on mine. There was a flicker, just a second. Not fear exactly, but something like discomfort, like a ghost had sat in the front row. "Thank you all so much for being here today," she began, voice smooth and charming, like nothing was wrong. "This cause means everything to me, and I'm honored to stand beside each of you as we continue building our mission together." And then, I stood up. She paused. All eyes shifted to me. I spoke calmly. No yelling. No theatrics. Just volume enough for the microphone at the center of the aisle to catch my words. "I'd like to thank Tessa too," I said, "for showing us all how powerful appearances can be. How carefully words can be arranged to hide something ugly." The room tensed. Her face tightened. She stepped back from the podium slightly, but didn't interrupt. She didn't dare. I held up the documents. Not waving them, just holding them. One page in each hand. The Rio itinerary and the drafted email, printed in clean black ink. "I came here today not to accuse, but to reveal. To remind everyone that character isn't built on staged speeches and polished smiles. It's built on truth. And while this room knows Tessa the professional, I know Tessa the planner of lies. The woman who arranged a romantic getaway with another man while still married. The woman who plotted to paint me as unstable in legal filings. The woman who weaponized vulnerability to win sympathy." Gasps rippled across the room. Her boss, seated to my left, actually leaned forward in disbelief. I placed the documents on the edge of the stage. "I'm done being silent. I'm done being polite. And I'm done being the villain in the story she's been rewriting behind closed doors." Tessa tried to speak. "This is completely inappropriate," but the murmurs drowned her out. People were already reading the papers. The lie had been cracked open in the one place she thought she was untouchable. I turned to leave. I didn't stay for the fallout. I didn't need to. What came after was a blur. Phone calls from mutual friends who had believed her stories and were now stunned into silence. A message from her sister apologizing. Even one from her mother, who had previously blocked me on Tessa's request, asking if I was all right. The community board released a statement a few days later that Tessa was stepping away to focus on personal matters. Ellis sent me a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. It was perfect. I moved out of the city a few weeks later. Sold the house. My house. And started over in a town where no one knew my name or my story. I began therapy not to fix myself, but to meet myself for the first time. To find the voice I'd buried so long under someone else's shadow. One morning, sitting by the window of a quiet coffee shop, no orange umbrellas in sight, a woman sat down at the table next to mine. She didn't look like Tessa, thank God. She wore a hoodie, messy bun, paint on her hands. She caught me staring and smirked. "You look like a man who just dropped a 10-year weight," she said. I smiled. "You have no idea." We talked. About music. About second chances. About learning not to shrink for people who are afraid of your light. Her name was June. That conversation lasted 3 hours. And it's still going. So no, this isn't a story about revenge. Or loss. It's a story about remembering who you are after someone spent years convincing you that you were nothing. Tessa wanted to control the narrative. But in the end, I told my truth louder. And it set me free.